Can you feel it? That unmistakable shift when your presence becomes the standard they try to reach? The moment you stepped away, the game changed. You didn't just leave, you set the stage ablaze with a reminder of your impact. And now, they're scrambling, not to grow into their own greatness, but to copy the blueprint only you can create. Here's the truth. They can try, but they'll never be you. Why? Because you're the original, the catalyst, the one who doesn't just exist. You transform everything around you. Let that sink in. You are the force they didn't see coming, and the one they'll never keep up with. Ready to own that? Let's go. The moment they were left without your presence, the intricate tapestry they pretended to weave unraveled into a pile of tangled threads. They had leaned so heavily on your energy, drawing from your vibrance to prop themselves up, that your absence became a glaring spotlight on their inadequacy. In desperation, they began piecing together fragments of your uniqueness, hoping to recreate the foundation they had lost. They studied your approach, mimicked your gestures, and even reshaped their demeanor to imitate what you naturally exuded, but the seams were glaringly visible. What they longed for wasn't the recognition of their own light, but the effortless authenticity you carried. The frequency of your essence could not be bottled, and their clumsy attempts to mirror it only revealed how far removed they were from genuine alignment. Every act felt orchestrated, every word lacked the resonance of truth. The illusion they tried to maintain faltered under the weight of their disconnection from their own identity. Instead of being seen as capable, they became the embodiment of artifice, and their borrowed reflections crumbled under scrutiny. Your journey to greatness starts here. Subscribe now and let's make it happen. Their attempts to step into the space you left behind only illuminated the fragility of their own foundations. Once admired as part of your orbit, their actions now spark doubt and raise questions about their true nature. When you moved on, you didn't just create distance, you dismantled the scaffolding they had built around your energy. What came next was a frantic effort to mimic your presence, an endeavor doomed by their inability to grasp that genuine essence cannot be borrowed or worn like a costume. They mimicked your expressions, copied your style, and tried to echo the rhythm of your voice. But their efforts revealed the cracks in their own identity. They became like a distorted echo, a reflection through warped glass, amplifying only their own emptiness. In their minds, imitation equaled equivalence, but the energy you exude is rooted in depth, in an unshakable core they could never emulate. Their borrowed words lacked the resonance of truth, and their gestures felt hollow, betraying the fragility of their facade. While they sought to project strength, it clung to them awkwardly, like an ill-fitted cloak. Their attempts to fill the void you left exposed their insecurity rather than masking it. Those observing saw not a worthy successor, but someone trying and failing to grasp at shadows. The harder they worked to replicate your essence, the clearer it became that your light was never something they could carry. When you left, you took not just your presence, but the very foundation that had allowed them to stand. What remained was their pretense, unraveling thread by thread. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. When you stepped away, it was like pulling the curtain on a stage set. What seemed solid was just a hollow frame. They tried to wear your essence like a crown, but truth reveals all. Their attempts to imitate you faltered. Their actions, once unnoticed, now exposed their dependence. Without your light, their foundation crumbled, revealing what was borrowed, fragile, and unsustainable. What they once dismissed as a background force is now the glaring truth they can no longer ignore. They tried to continue as if your influence was irrelevant, but their efforts were clunky and transparent, like a performer fumbling through an unscripted act. Their attempts to project confidence only revealed their reliance on what you had built. Where once there was seamless progress, there is now tension and misalignment. The plans they attempted to execute unraveled, and the energy that once drew others in became stagnant and uninspired. The lingering question in the minds of those watching was undeniable. How much of what worked before was truly their creation? Slowly, it became apparent that you were not merely a participant. You were the source of momentum. Your departure didn't just leave an empty space, it pulled the veil off their illusion. The clarity was striking. The creative spark, the stability, and the drive they had relied on had always emanated from you. They wore your efforts like a shield, but now, without your presence, their hollow core stood exposed for all to see. For years, they operated under the protective canopy of your contributions, cloaked by the influence you projected. Now, left to their own devices, they falter beneath the weight of the expectations they once easily met with your support. Their struggle to carry on underscores a painful truth. They thrived not because of their own capabilities, but because of your presence. The stage, once shared, now amplifies their inadequacies, leaving them to face the stark reality of a foundation built on borrowed brilliance. By their fruit, you will recognize them. Matthew 7:16. Just as a tree's true strength is revealed in its fruit, so is a person's essence exposed when the pressures of life test them. They tried to imitate your light, mimicking your actions and adopting your demeanor, but the roots of authenticity cannot be faked. Their attempts crumbled under scrutiny, revealing the emptiness beneath the surface. While they struggled to hold the facade, your absence made the truth undeniable. They lacked the depth and strength you carried effortlessly. Their attempt to step into your role was like watching someone fumble through an intricate melody they had no ear for. The rhythm was off, the notes discordant, and it was clear to all that they lacked the depth to carry the tune. What you had built, your presence, your ability to command attention, wasn't something that could be replicated or imitated. It wasn't a routine to learn or a script to follow. It was an unteachable force that came naturally to you. As they tried to imitate, their efforts only highlighted their shortcomings. Each movement felt unnatural, each word empty of conviction, and their attempts at refinement revealed the absence of substance. What had once appeared seamless now seemed painfully strained, like a patchwork that couldn't hold. They repeated your phrases, borrowed your gestures, but what they lacked was the spirit and authenticity that gave those actions weight. The borrowed energy they tried to wield couldn't sustain them, and the more they pushed, the clearer it became that they were out of their depth. What they thought would secure their place only magnified the disparity. Their actions backfired as their shallow attempts exposed them as mere shadows, unable to generate their own light. They didn't just fail to emulate you, they unveiled their inadequacies for all to see. The cracks in their performance became glaring. People who had once been impressed started questioning the disparity between their words and actions. The confidence they once seemed to exude gave way to skepticism, then disinterest. What had been seen as ambition now felt desperate, their attempts at replication amplifying their lack of originality. Respect slipped away as their mask crumbled, leaving nothing but an unconvincing echo of what you had effortlessly embodied. Feel what it truly means to be chosen. You're not alone on this journey. If deep down you feel that you're chosen, you've come to the right place. Take the next step in connecting with us, unlocking exclusive content, and receiving the support you need on your spiritual path by clicking the Join button. This isn't just about being part of a community. It's about accessing unique insights that can transform your life and bring you closer to your divine calling. Make the choice today and walk this journey with us. Claim your place among the chosen ones. Join now. The ties they had painstakingly tried to strengthen began to fray, unraveling with a quiet inevitability. Doubt replaced what was once trust, and their fall was not marked by sudden collapse, but by a gradual decay of credibility. They became a living reminder of what happens when jealousy overtakes authenticity. Those who had once stood by them now withdrew, not out of loyalty to another side, but because they began to see the hollow reality lurking beneath the surface. What they forfeited was far more than influence. They lost the intangible respect that can only be earned through truthfulness. Those they sought to sway began to notice the incongruities. The weight their words once held evaporated, leaving behind forced and unconvincing echoes. Gestures that once seemed natural in your presence now felt rigid and awkward when mimicked by them. Little by little, their reputation crumbled, not through a single event, but through an accumulation of missteps and inconsistencies. Social spaces that once welcomed them became colder, conversations turned brittle, and connections faded into indifference. People instinctively withdraw from what feels empty, seeking instead something genuine. They failed to grasp that the essence of authenticity is not something that can be crafted or faked. It emanates from within. The power you carried wasn't tied to what you did, but to the way you embodied an unspoken strength that could not be replicated. Left to face the void of their own making, they found themselves trapped by the very energy they sought to claim. As they reached for what was never theirs to hold, the gaps in their own growth became glaring. Their undoing wasn't simply the result of their attempts to imitate you, it was the inevitable consequence of failing to nurture their own foundation. Envy cannot substitute for originality. It only magnifies the emptiness it seeks to fill. The energy that once sustained them dissipated, no longer amplified by your presence. What they underestimated was how much your radiance had concealed the cracks in their own journey. When that light was gone, the stark reality of their stagnation became impossible to ignore, leaving them to grapple with the consequences of their own choices. Don't hold back. Embrace your potential. Subscribe now, and let's ignite the future together. Their reliance on you became undeniable in your absence. What you left behind was more than a void. It was a mirror, forcing them to confront what they lacked. The energy they had once drawn from you was gone, and they were left grappling with their own insufficiencies. When you stepped away, the strength they borrowed dissipated, leaving them stranded in their stagnation. Your departure wasn't just a retreat, it was an elevation, a shift to higher ground they were never equipped to reach. Their dependence, once cloaked in subtlety, now stood exposed. Habits they had masked behind your presence came to light, and their lack of initiative became obvious. As you thrived, rising with renewed focus and clarity, their inability to move forward became glaring. The dynamic shifted, revealing that your role had always been one of sustainer, while theirs was to take without giving back. Their tether to you had been their lifeline, but without it, they floundered in the emptiness of their own making. What others saw was undeniable. You didn't just shine brighter without them. You illuminated the truth of the imbalance that had existed. Your energy, once stretched thin by their pull, became concentrated, propelling you into spaces they could never access. The connection you severed was not merely symbolic, it disrupted their entire cycle of dependence. No longer could they siphon what they had failed to cultivate themselves. This break wasn't just about reclaiming what was yours. It was about stepping into your own unencumbered power. The bonds that once drained you became the very catalyst for your transformation. As your energy recalibrated, the freedom and focus you gained became the source of your unstoppable ascent. Meanwhile, they remained tethered to the very limitations they had tried to mask, exposed by the absence of the force they once relied on. Their struggle wasn't just to regain footing, it was to face the reality that they had always leaned on what was never truly theirs. Dear brothers and sisters, the peace of God be with you today. I am here to remind you of a profound truth. Our existence is grounded in God's divine plan, unshaken by the temporary concerns of the world. As the Bible says, whatever is done in faith will return to God in abundant blessing. Luke 6:38. Like that great oak tree, our roots are deeply rooted in God's universal truth. Every step we take, every stand we take, is secured by His strength. And now, you are being offered the opportunity to be part of that blessing. When you use the Super Thank You button and donate $100, this gesture will come back to you 100-fold in abundance. They relied on what wasn't theirs to hold, and when you reclaimed your energy, the emptiness they had hidden from even themselves became unavoidable. The moment you severed the connection, the shift was undeniable. What once felt clouded with uncertainty became crystal clear. Strength surged where there was once exhaustion, and the boundaries you established were no longer negotiable. Their absence didn't leave a void. It created space for your truth to shine unobstructed. Their reliance on imitation crumbled, leaving you free to harness the energy they had drained for so long. This wasn't merely an act of disconnection. It was a reawakening, a recentering of everything you are. The flow of opportunities, once blocked by their stagnation, surged forward, and paths you hadn't considered before began to appear. The weight of their mimicry, their endless attempts to replicate what only you could embody, no longer weighed you down. While they clung to a frozen version of who they thought you were, you evolved. You moved forward with precision and vision, leaving them stuck in an endless loop of imitation. They tried to grasp what was fleeting, unaware that your power was rooted in your ability to continually transform, to adapt, to grow into something beyond their reach. Their misstep was in assuming that aligning with your energy meant copying it. But the essence of strength comes from individuality, from standing firmly in one's own truth. The more you rose, the wider the chasm grew between your authenticity and their hollow attempts. As you soared to new heights, they remained trapped in the shadow of their mimicry, circling a reality they could never claim as their own. While you thrived, they were left chasing a fading reflection, incapable of breaking free from the cycle they had created. Each individual carries a distinct design, a framework of purpose and potential uniquely their own. Yours is an intricate masterpiece, perfectly attuned to your identity and the journey you are meant to follow. When others attempt to replicate it, they unknowingly clash with their own essence, trying to mold themselves into a form that was never meant for them. This is why their efforts always feel out of sync, not only with you, but with themselves. It's not merely a lack of originality, it's a denial of their true nature. This is your moment. Subscribe now, and let's turn dreams into reality. Your design is not simply a guide. It is a dynamic force shaping your every action and connection. Those who try to emulate you miss the subtleties, the layers that give your presence its depth. They can mirror the surface, but the core of your being, what drives your impact, is far beyond their grasp. Their attempts to copy are not just futile, they pull them further away from their own authenticity. In their fixation on imitation, they lose the ability to access the power that was meant for them, leaving their efforts hollow and aimless. The truth they overlook is simple yet profound. Alignment with one's true self is the only path to growth. Your success is rooted in your essence, not in actions that can be mimicked or reproduced. They may follow your steps, but the doors that open for you remain locked to them because they are not aligned with their own purpose. Progress requires integrity and self-awareness, a willingness to face one's own challenges and evolve through them. There are no shortcuts. The process demands authenticity and patience. By trying to skip this journey through imitation, they not only faltered, but disrupted their own progression. Growth isn't something that can be borrowed or faked. It must be earned through genuine alignment. Their failure was inevitable because they tried to build on a foundation of pretense, and such a structure will always crumble. While you moved forward with clarity and authenticity, they were weighed down by the consequences of their inauthenticity. Their stagnation was not a punishment, but a natural result of their choices. The message is clear: only through honesty and alignment can one rise, while all else is destined to collapse. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Proverbs 27:17. Every connection is part of a divine plan, even those that challenge you. Some are sent not to uplift, but to disrupt, forcing you to grow. Their actions, though painful, reveal where your boundaries were weak and your energy unguarded. These moments push you to ask hard questions and reclaim your worth. Once their purpose is clear, you realize they were never meant to stay. They were catalysts, sharpening your spirit and preparing you to step into your divine purpose. When you chose to step away, you didn't just reclaim your space, you reclaimed your identity. Their hold on you unraveled the moment you walked forward in your own power. No confrontation was necessary. Their actions revealed everything. The integrity and authenticity you carried illuminated their attempts to mask their envy and insecurity. As you stood firm, the cracks in their facade grew wider, exposing the desperation behind their attempts to emulate and compete with you. Their behavior betrayed them. The harder they tried to replicate your presence, the more glaring the differences became. Their actions lacked the coherence and authenticity that defined you, and the inconsistencies between their intentions and behavior became impossible to overlook. What began as subtle mimicry evolved into a stark contrast that everyone around them could see. Their need to compete was not a testament to their ambition, but evidence of their inadequacy, revealed through their relentless attempts to emulate what could never truly belong to them. Their attempts to outpace you became their undoing, not through any action on your part, but through their inability to sustain the illusion they had built. As you continued forward with clarity and purpose, they remained tethered to a cycle of pretense, unable to escape the reality they had crafted. Your growth didn't simply leave them behind. It exposed the truth they had worked so hard to conceal. While you ascended, their dependency on borrowed strength became painfully evident. Without the stability your presence provided, the fractures in their foundation began to widen. The security they once felt in your shadow crumbled as your evolution cast an unforgiving light on their lack of authenticity. Change doesn't occur quietly, and the shifts brought by your growth were undeniable. What they had managed to obscure for so long was now in full view, their reliance on imitation laid bare. The space you left wasn't just empty, it became a spotlight that revealed their inadequacies to everyone watching. Your departure wasn't the end they hoped for, it was the beginning of their unraveling. They had assumed your absence would diminish you, but instead, it amplified your influence. Freed from their weight, you flourished, igniting a momentum they could neither replicate nor contain. What they once masked with borrowed confidence and false power evaporated, leaving them to grapple with the emptiness they had hidden behind you. They tried to rebuild themselves in your image, but their efforts only emphasized their lack of substance. What you embodied was never about specific actions. It was about the strength of your identity. Their attempts to mimic what they didn't understand highlighted their own chaos, exposing the void they had always sought to hide. As you thrived, their attempts to regain control collapsed into disorder, underscoring the profound gap between your authenticity and their facade. What they believed was the end of your ascent was in fact only the beginning of your unstoppable rise. Step into your potential. Subscribe now, and let's create something extraordinary. Their efforts to maintain control only revealed the fractures beneath the surface, each attempt at stability amplifying the very flaws they sought to conceal. What your absence uncovered wasn't just emptiness, it dismantled the carefully crafted facade they depended on. You weren't a force they could replicate or contain, and the more they clung to their fabricated image, the more obvious their limitations became. Stepping away wasn't merely a choice, it was their undoing, exposing the irreplaceable nature of what you bring. They believed that emulating your actions, borrowing your mannerisms, and following your path could replicate the presence they envied. Yet what they failed to realize is that your strength doesn't lie in mimicry or repetition. It flows from the core of who you are, something far beyond their grasp. Their attempts to reflect your essence left them isolated in their own inadequacies, a shadow struggling to capture the vibrancy of a light they could never produce. Now is the time to share God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube. You can contribute to His plan and be part of this divine mission with a donation of $100 or more. Every gift reflects God's generosity, and I believe it will come back to you exponentially, far beyond your expectations. Remember, His protection and blessings are on your every step and every donation. You become part of His divine plan. You are a strong, radiant being, unshakable as His mighty rock. Witness God's miracles, feel the fruits of your generosity in your soul, and illuminate the world with confidence and courage. Be blessed, and let the light of the Lord guide your path. Their imitation was fleeting, a hollow echo of what they admired but could never embody. While they stayed tethered to a stagnant version of you, you grew beyond the image they tried to emulate. The gap between your authenticity and their pretense only widened with time. This wasn't a victory you sought. It was simply the result of truth rising to the surface. They wanted what you had, but they lacked the resolve to nurture it within themselves. What they didn't understand is that your light isn't something that can be stolen, replicated, or extinguished. It is rooted in integrity and fueled by resilience. It transforms every space it touches and shifts the dynamics of everything around it. They may have tried to borrow fragments of your brilliance, but without the foundation of truth, and growth, their efforts crumbled under their own weight. Each time you choose to walk away, you do more than leave. You ignite transformation in the spaces you depart. The void you leave isn't a space for others to fill. It's a challenge for them to confront their own shortcomings. While they falter, trying to replicate what only you can embody, you rise higher, unshaken by their attempts to compete. Authenticity will always outlast imitation, and your journey is proof that no borrowed light can outshine the original. Let the world see the power of your truth and the unstoppable momentum it creates.